Okay, good day to all of you. So now we are continuing with the second section of our lecture series under the topic of Introduction to Prototyping. I think the term prototyping is somewhat familiar to us now because even during my first lecture also, I was keep on pointing about the idea of prototyping and its advantages. So here in this lecture, the main emphasis is towards to dig a little bit deeper into the concept of prototyping. So prototype, we need to understand what is a prototype. So this is a very prominently used term in the computer science arena. So let's try to understand what this actually means. So prototyping can be identified as a sense of an approximation which has been created to replicate the real world requirement. If you are creating a house, we are initially commencing the construction process with a plan. Initially we have a plan, and according to the plan we commence our construction process. So plan can be identified as the initial prototype or initial base layer which could be utilized to get feedback on various aspects. In the same way, say if you are in the process of introducing a new model for a vehicle, for automobile, so in that aspect also it is impossible for us to directly construct the vehicle which is in our mind. At the initiation point we are coming up with a simple prototype of it. So the idea of prototype is very important because it has been identified as a very effective mechanism to capture feedback quickly. So therefore prototyping technique has been identified as a mechanism which has a tremendous positive impact. Now say for an example, as we already discussed, if you need to give feedback on certain aspect or on a certain thing, there should be something visible. Then only you can look into that, where it will create sort of an internal mental cognition in your mind, where then you can reason and come up with your authentic feedback which can be utilized to iteratively enhance the prototype. So I think there's a idiom telling picture is worth than 1,000 words. So the intention of prototyping is also addressing that concept to a great extent. Now say for an example, if we take a plane. Now say let's assume a particular human whom has not even heard of the idea of a aeroplane and have no clue about aeroplane and has not ever seen an aeroplane. So I am going to explain about an aeroplane to him or her using a lot of text and lot of words. So we don't know the type of the mental picture that he or she is creating in her mindset or in his mindset, because you have the freedom to conceptualize things in different ways. Though I am telling the same description, and if it is audible to 10 people, 10 people might conceptualize that in 10 different ways. We cannot stop that. So that will create a lot of ambiguity, especially in terms of group projects. When we are working as groups, different people in the same group understand the same aspect in different ways, creates a lot of problems when you are trying to move forward towards a one direction as a one synchronized team. So how to solve it? The best option is prototyping. In prototyping, we are initially coming up with a basic flavor, basic design of what are we talking about. So when we show it to the relevant parties, everybody is looking at that. So there is no opportunity of misconceptions or ambiguous internal conceptions to be created in your mindset, because directly you can see, it is witnessable in your eyes, right? So prototyping is, because of that aspect, it's extremely important. So with the help of prototyping, designers and users can establish very fruitful discussions debate on the requirement that designer is trying to fulfill from the designer's side, as well as stakeholder or the end user is expecting from his or her side, as per the interaction experiences they have gone through within the real world business operation. So prototyping is creating a very good platform for both these individual parties to meet together and visually analyze and discuss. That will help to come into a proper synchronized reconciliation at the end. Also, prototyping is providing a very good platform for the exploration and for the learning as well, because as I mentioned, development of an HCI or human interactive interface with the computer is an iterative and incremental process. So you can come up with the initial version of the prototype, the relevant stakeholders analyze the prototype, and they learn through exploring. They learn some aspects, some attributes are going to work and some attributes are not going to work. So they can collectively discuss and come to agreements what to be included and what not to be included. So that is very strong platform. That is why prototyping is identified as an extremely successful mechanism with a tremendous positive impact. So as you can see in the slide, I elaborated on almost all these facts. The ultimate goal of the prototyping is as a tremendously successful, effective mechanism of getting feedback quickly, and that is also very refined and related feedback, because you can witness, you can see from your physical eyes what are you giving feedback about. So I hope the contents on this slide is properly elaborated. So let's move to the next slide. Yes, when creating a prototype, we should be aware of certain general attributes associated with prototypes. Usually prototypes are bigger in size and it is incomplete. Now say for an example, before you are planning to create a nice artwork, initially you will take the pencil and you sketch certain things. Maybe that could be the internal mental picture which is coming to your mind. Prototype is also something like that. It is incomplete. It is less attractive. It is not the complete fully functional version. It is an incomplete version which is bigger in size, right? But it is very important as a starting initiation platform. So prototype could be not attractive because it's just an initial version which has been defined to collectively derive concisable agreements on the aspects to be fulfilled. So usually a prototype is bigger in size, it is incomplete, less attractive, and it's not a miniaturized version. Now say for an example, if you are in the production phase of a mobile phone, we try to miniaturize that as much as possible. So how that final miniaturized state has been reached? Through an incremental and iterative multiple cycles which has been effectively completed through series of prototypes, and finally you will be able to come up with the miniaturized version of the targeted product. So at the inception it is very large, less attractive, but when you are going through the iterative cycles with the necessary increments, finally you are reaching to the end goal or the end product which is being interpreted in your mindset. So the most significant attribute of the prototype is it is a quick way of getting accurate feedback. So the design parties can have a proper understanding on what they are going to design, and it will resolve misunderstanding at the initial stages. Resolving misunderstanding at the latter stage is a big waste of money and human effort and time. So those problems can be prevented at the very early stages, so which is very crucial in preventing the designing going in the wrong direction. So if we look at certain more attributes, initial construction of a prototype should not be costly. You should come up with a mechanism, or you should have the proper infrastructure, or you have to research on the proper mechanism of creating the required prototype with the least cost and least effort, because that is not the ultimate goal, or that is not the ultimate product. The purpose of the prototyping is a solid platform for us to get a concise, reconciliated feedback or insights of multiple peoples who have been involved for the designing purpose. And the next point is, prototype should be very easy to change during the iterative phases we are going through in the incremental and iterative phases of the prototype. People might be providing various feedbacks. So accordingly, according to those feedbacks, adaptations, accommodating the required adaptation to accomplish the end users and the stakeholders' requirements can be done in a very convenient way without taking a lot of time and lot of effort, as well as without investing a lot of money on it. So prototypes, are these only limited to computer science? No. It's a very important discipline, as I have explained already, in the automobile aspects, in construction aspects. Also, this prototyping is playing a very important, significant role. But I would say, when it comes to software engineering, the role of prototyping is even more critical. Why is that? If you are developing a car, if you are constructing a bridge, you can witness it from your physical eyes. It is physically visible. It's a tangible piece of object. But what about software? Software is intangible. You cannot see until the final product is being released. But at the time trying to integrate the components of a final product together with an invisible setting, there could be a lot of complications where the entire project will end up with a very complicated and problematic setting. So in software engineering, hence the artifacts developed in software engineering is invisible. Prototyping is extremely vital, and the process of prototyping is very good, and it is very significant, and recommended to follow the prototyping phases properly throughout the development processes. And ultimately, for a prototype, it will have a retirement stage, because once you reach to the final goal or final state, henceforth there is no value in the prototyping. So prototype is for the requirement of creating a solid platform for the appropriate and properly refined brainstorming purposes only. Once the product is released to the market, prototype will reach to its retirement. Okay, so when we are creating a prototype, we have to consider on certain valid points. The most important thing is, first we have to have a goal, in the sense, what are we trying to fulfill from this prototype? With that understanding, you can tweak the nature or the type of the prototype that you are going to be developed. So in order to establish a proper goal, you have to have a good understanding about the type of the business that you are considered about creating your prototype. Then only you can get a proper understanding about the possible interactions, and we are creating the prototype to fulfill the goals associated with this environment. What goals? Interaction goals associated with the context of the business operation. So at the commencement stage of a prototype, the decisions which are being derived after looking at the prototype is very drastic and very large in its scale. So say for an example, initially you at the prototyping stage, in the brainstorming sessions, collectively people might debate and argue how we can implement this solution. Are we going to implement this as a mobile service, or a web service, or a web application, or a standalone service, etc.? So those are very drastic decisions in large scale, because depending on those decisions, entire architectures associated with your developments, technologies that you are going to be used will be changed, because ultimate goal is end user has to be satisfied. End users should be happy to use the developed software. Otherwise, though how sophisticated is your system, it is going to be a complete waste, because users will reject it due to its complexity. So it's too late if we are going to consider on those aspects once the product is released or product is at its final stages. From the inception, this has to be planned. So where again prototyping becomes very important, very salient. Then after multiple iterations, when you are reaching to the final laps through iterative and incremental sessions associated with the prototype, at the final stages, then the design decisions or the related decisions are very minimalistic, because most of the significant changes which are having a high weightages has been resolved in the previous iterations. So in the final stage associated iterations, it could be tweaking of the colors, tweaking of the wordings, etc. So it's important to understand in the life cycle of a prototype, at the initial stages, the design decisions derived from the prototype analysis is very large and drastic. But at the latter stages, after completion of multiple iterations, the decisions derived are very minimalistic and low in its scale. Right. So again, let's look into the purpose of creating a prototype. There are three important aspects that we are going to fulfill when we are creating a prototype. Yes, we spoke about that earlier. The main goal is to get quick feedback, but if we can consider on these three axioms also, we are in a position to get more refined feedback. What is the first axiom? First point, feel. How should it look like? So that is a very prominent and important question which has to be resolved through the group discussions which are taking place, created on top of the initial version of the prototype which has been created. Then implementation. How should it work? First one, how should it look like? Second one, how should it work? So that could be addressing the technical aspects, technical requirements. Third point, role. Who could be using it? What would be their experiences? This is very important, because this is the point we are extracting the interaction experiences. So when we are planning a prototype, those three axioms has to be addressed. Planning of the prototype has to be done via considering on those rudimentary axioms, because it is extremely vital in refining the pathway to get necessary and appropriate feedback. Because getting feedback is good, but what if you get unnecessary feedback? Again, that is a lot of waste. It's like you have a lot of noise in your feedback, lot of irrelevant things. Then you have to remove and cleanse this, which is going to be a further complex task. So if you are sticking to those important guidelines, your feedback will be very relevant. Now, a very good example as a use case which I would like to point out is the use case of designing the internal cabin of the Boeing flights. I think most of you have heard Boeing is a very reputed brand for airplanes, aircrafts. So initially the designers of the Boeing company, they utilize a warehouse. It's not an actual aeroplane. For the prototype, they selected the normal warehouse which is fixed on the floor and created from cement, a warehouse. Inside the warehouse, they created the prototype where the relevant HCI engineers and other stakeholders went inside the warehouse and experienced the interactions, and they gave relevant recommendations to the designing teams, HCI teams, about how the passenger spaces has to be adjusted, passenger comfort, ergonomics in the sense proper gestures and postures has to be there when a passenger is seated for long hours to prevent neck pains, back pains, leg pains. So those things has to be properly considered during the design timing, and also about the luggage spaces. So all these aspects are considered and finalized via using a warehouse at the design stage, which played the role of a prototype. And keep in mind, it is not a real aircraft, it is a warehouse. Okay, so next section we are going to discuss about is the basics of the design and evolutions. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much for the attentions that you have utilized in going through my lecture session. I would recommend listen to the aspects discussed clearly and slowly. If you need, rewind it back and listen it again until you get a proper, solid confidence on the concepts discussed. Thank you very much.